Welcome to the Heaven on Earth podcast, a world where you study the story you were born into and redesign it into the story you choose. A world where you can have heaven on earth right here, right now, no matter the past. For me, heaven on earth is a holistic experience, leading with the heart, engaging with mind, body, and spirit. It's mindful, fostering calm and secure attachments. As we rise into consciousness, it's an earthly journey where we sensually embrace dynamic living.
Welcome back, my soul tribe. Wherever you are in the world, welcome, truly, welcome. I always like to pause here and remember that I'm not just speaking to Americans or to people in one culture or in one country. I am speaking to the global human, which I am too. For those of you who don't know this, I was born in Thailand. My dad's American Italian and my mom is Colombian. So I've got all sorts of mix in me and I love it. It makes me really feel like a global citizen. To the empaths, to the sensitive humans, to the open-hearted humans, to humans who are working on their IQ and their EQ. I am speaking to the people who think deeply, feel deeply, and know somewhere inside of us, we are at a point of massive expansion and learning way above our normal baseline of survival. Shout out Trauma Rising. Okay, if you're new here, welcome to Heaven on Earth. This is a psycho-spiritual podcast. It is not a religious podcast. We throw everything on the table. We talk about it from the vantage point of different spokes on the wheel with one topic in the middle. And hopefully the objective is for you to remember who you are. Remember you. Because personally, when I talk about awakening, I'm really talking about remembering. I love the word a priori, and a priori is a Latin word that means before, almost like before it all happened, before it's the original version, right? The prime version. And so this process is a process of remembering who we are as humans, as a collective, but also individually. And I believe that we're holistic, that we are a combination of operating systems, mind, body, spirit, heart, emotions. And we have all sorts of operating systems that we don't investigate fully, but we're here to do that. Your body holds ancient, intelligent. It holds the story of all your folks. So does your nervous system. And that's not always the best thing because a lot of us have come from nervous systems that have been jacked up by danger. But get this, it's also about your soul. The more you listen to your soul, it'll guide you on your personal way home, because it's all yours. It's customized to you. And if we learn to listen, which is one of the things this podcast attempts to do, is for you to listen to your inner journey and your intuition, you will find your way back to who you want to be. Today's episode feels really right for end of the year vibes, for ending 2025 vibes. It's an episode that I've been mulling over for a while now. Maybe I want to say maybe a year and a half, that I've just been playing with this idea. And the idea is fasting. About a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I began to follow a woman called Mindy Pelz. Look her up. I hope I remember to put the link in the description. Mindy Pelz. She is so thorough and so complete. Most of the people that I actually shout out on this podcast are really thorough and really complete in what they teach. And I love them. Mindy Pelz is one of them. She is a physician that has taken the holistic route. And part of that route is to teach everyone. She's on a mission, literally, to get 1 million people to learn and to do fasting. And again, isn't that a priori? fasting was part of like our original operating system when it came to how we dealt with food and our bodies, mainly because of survival, right? We had to go days as humans without eating, and then we'd have a huge, huge, huge meal, and then we'd fast again. But what the research is telling us now is how good that is for all of our operating systems. I see it as a deep cleanse, as a cleanup. And that's how I talk about emotional fasting. You know where I'm going. Hold on. Let me talk about Mindy Pelt. She wrote a book called Fast Like a Girl because she also talks about the differences in bodies between men and women. Hello. Yes. I had a cousin, you guys. Let me just tell a little joke here. I had a cousin who was studying to be a doctor, and he used to always say that they spent a day on the male anatomy and they spent a month on the female anatomy. Yeah. There's a lot to learn. So today's episode is like an integration episode. And as I was learning, because I started doing fasting about 2 years ago, and I actually found it simple. And again, not easy, but simple. It was straightforward. I really connected with it. I got it. And as I followed her and followed her teachings, I just kept having that inner bell ring inside of me of like, this has so much to do with holistic healing, so much to do with the inner journey. So today I'm going to try and make those comparisons. How literal fasting is connected. We can connect it to the journey of going inside of ourselves. And so, listen, I'm going to do baby talk about fasting. Ugh, I can't remember his name right now, but I'll find it. I'll look for it later. I don't want to spend a lot of time racking my brain trying to remember his name, but he won a prize for talking about the benefits of fasting in terms of how the body begins to heal itself. Oh, isn't that amazing? That's how powerful we are as humans. Anyway, I digress. I get super eager and super excited, but today's episode will be fully, fully, fully about that, of making these connections, of using it as a map for the inner journey, which is something we talk about a lot on this podcast, for meditation, for healing, for what happens. Check it out. When we stop consuming, filling ourselves, talk a lot about how we fill those emptinesses inside us to escape, to cope, to manage. As always, I'm not suggesting that you fast. I'm just going to make points of connection like I always do. I put a topic on the table and I just start to unpack the way that I find that there's similarities. If you're new to the podcast and you're new to my work, let me just say a few words there. I also have a YouTube channel. You might be watching this on my YouTube channel or on Spotify, etc. But on my YouTube channel, I have 3 types of content, and it depends on your mood and on your capacity, on your, how much time you've got. The first thing I do is something called Claudisms, which is actually slang word that my clients have given for the way that I speak, the way that I teach things. And these are like little CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy bites, Claudia style. They're short, they're digestible, they help you mentally reframe a situation. Maybe they help you emotionally regulate, or they help you spiritually connect with the now moment, is how I like to say it. And they're my own little slang. What you'll find is that they're very catchy and easy to say to yourself. They also serve as an affirmation. The second form of content I have there are blog series. So I'll take about a month, maybe a month or 6 weeks, and I'll talk about one particular topic from my insights or what I'm picking up from my clients or in the collective. These are medium length and they're explorations. They're my own personal explorations through my psycho-spiritual lens, and I blend clinical language with spiritual language as always. For example, there's a blog series that's called What's Love Got to Do with It? And it talks about dating. I'm going to do more on dating this year because that's a topic. And I just finished one called The Narcissist Declassified, which was a way of talking about the narcissist you don't expect. You might have an idea about narcissism, but there are other ways that narcissism shows up. So I did 6 weeks on that. also to help launch the book, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. The third form of content is much longer, which is this podcast. And it's like a long form conversation, either with a guest, with myself, with you. And this is generally where I zoom out. I talk about the big picture, about the zeitgeist, about culture, about this point in time in humanity in terms of trauma, healing, power, love, leadership. And I use a very particular and signature approach, which I call the all is in the small is in the all. And what that means is that whatever is happening in the individual, I make those connections from the individual to the big populace, to the collective. You'll see. All right, you ready? Let's talk about fasting and drinking my little coffee here. And fasting has really, really worked for me. It doesn't work for everyone, but I really love it because I love the feeling of a deep cleanse, basically, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, or physically, or relationally, right? I love repairing, cleaning up as we go, cleaning up as we go. It's like folding your clothes quickly or washing the dishes so you don't have a whole bunch of dirty dishes in the sink that you've got to do for 2 hours on a Sunday. That's the vibe. That's the vibe that I feel with fasting. So I don't tend to see fasting as deprivation or punishment or feeling out of control in some. I tend to see it as a way to reduce inflammation, as a way to drop into our bodies. And this completely tracks with how I teach. So biologically, inflammation happens when our body is under constant stress. That makes sense. It's like a blowfish. It's like we're a blowfish. And stress is the signal that there's danger. What happens when a blowfish blows out? It's when they feel danger. So they blow out. So your body will be inflamed if it's under constant digestion, constant insulin spikes, constant stimulation. If we're throwing in stuff that it really doesn't know how to read, it confuses the body. So the whole biological system doesn't get a time to listen to this. It's so beautiful. Rest and repair or recalibrate. That made so much sense to me because that's what happens with the inner journey. That's what happens with children. What happens with beautiful down and quality time. We need the time to rest, to repair, and to recalibrate. So psychological inflammation looks very similar, right? Inflammation will show up like this. You're constantly reacting. You're constantly triggered. You might be explaining, defending, fixing, moving outside to stop yourself from feeling inflamed. Maybe you're constantly consuming information, social media, consuming validation, consuming distractions, escape mechanisms. You're inflamed. Let me get back to an example about the blowfish. I was tracking ever since I was young, but because I wasn't intuitively aware or I wasn't as well versed as I am now in energetics, I used to always feel that when I went home to my family on the holidays, get this, because we're in holiday season, every single time, y'all, I used to always feel like I blew up. And it's not because I was eating, although my head would tell me you're eating too much, you're fat, right? All the usual negative self-talk. And people would comment. But it always felt like I blew up. As I've become more energetic and intuitively literate, I've noticed that when I am around situations like a good empath, like a highly sensitive, that feel like I'm going to have to do a lot of work, fix, save, even talk sometimes because I tend to be a little bit hermity. I know it feels like I'm an extrovert and I am, and I can be a really powerful extrovert, but I really, really love my quiet hermit time. Like I really do love sort of silence and privacy and all of that. So I began to track that was real, that I would blow up like a blowfish in many situations, especially when being with my family. And now I've gone back and really tracked it and researched it and looked at pictures. Like, when did I blow up like a blowfish? And in what relationships? Very interesting little, little sidebar here, but in case my experience might help you notice things that happen to you that are energetic but show up in the body. So when we're talking about fasting, we're really talking about this question. What happens when you stop acting on every impulse, physical or emotional? Every craving, and allow your system to settle. We don't force healing on ourselves. Healing has to be gentle in its process, even though, and maybe because it brings up hard things. And healing happens when inflammation goes down. You loving this already? That's psycho-spiritually and physically. That's why I kept saying something is ringing a bell for me when I was listening to Mindy Peltz talk about actually just fasting for the body. I might send her this podcast. All right, you ready? Everyone have their PhD on Me journals. If you don't have a PhD on Me journal, go to my store. The link is in the bio. The store is called Train the Whole Human store. It's amazing. It's full of all of my cloudisms. It's full of reminders, holistic reminders of your healing journey. And part of it is the PhD on Me journal, because that's what we're doing. That's my whole life is about you getting a PhD on you. All right. Stage 1, write it down. Intermittent fasting. Now, buzzword, you've heard it everywhere. Basically, this is 13 to 15 hours of fasting. This is the first stage. This is the easiest stage because intermittent fasting, those 13 hours can happen while you sleep. So let's say you stop eating at 8 and you go all the way to 8 a.m., right? That would be 12 hours. And then you add 13, 14, or 15 hours. Let's say you go from 8 at night all the way to noon, and then you have your lunch. So that's already 13 to 15 hours, and that's intermittent fasting. And that's something you could do every single day. Again, I'm not suggesting that you do this. You can follow Mindy Peltz. Just always decide things for yourself. All I'm going to do is describe it and connect it to the psycho-spiritual journey. So this is what I would call, you know how I have the sacred pause spiritually? This is like the biological pause. Call it the biological pause. Biologically, this is when your body finishes digesting your last meal and stops producing constant insulin. So blood sugar stabilizes. Inflammation begins to reduce. Imagine what the body's feeling. It's like, I don't have to work right now. I can just go to sleep. Your system shifts out of always processing mode. So some of the signs that you might see is that people say, and I've experienced it, that I feel less bloated. I can think clearer. Your energy is steadier because you're not like roller coastering up and down and up and down. And nothing extreme is happening at all. This is the easy fast. Your body is simply remembering, right? Its natural rhythm because this is natural. This is a priori. It makes sense that while you sleep, your body's not working. That's the whole deal with saying like don't eat late at night, because that means that while you're sleeping, your body's going to have to digest while you're sleeping. So imagine working so much. It reminds me of the wounded empath that just is nonstop working. So let's make that translation. Can you see how my brain is just always making these connections? So when it comes to the inner journey, this stage is about pausing, the sacred pause. It's the PPPP. Remember my 4 Ps? Pause gives you power, which gives you possibilities, where you feel like you have prowess. Cloudism, by the way. This is when you notice a trigger, and instead of reacting, you pause. You say, ooh, I just felt that. Ooh, that was hard. Your whole body lights up. Your heart beats, and you say, thank you, trigger. Another cloudism, thank you, trigger. Because you lead me to the fault lines that lead to the gold mines. Thanks for the information, the triple Ds. I know I'm so full of acronyms, but you'll remember them. Discover the data, discern, and then decide. But in order to do the triple Ds, you have to have the pause. Basically, what you're saying is, I'm not going to act out of inflammation. This is huge. Just like not eating immediately does not mean starvation. Not reacting immediately does not mean suppression or passivity. It means discernment. It means choice. I also like to think of intermittent fasting as quiet time, alone time, daily, because intermittent fasting is daily. Those 13 to 15 hours are daily. So it's like finding your corner. I think I've mentioned this before. In my family, my son actually taught me this because he tends to be an introvert, is that quality time in our family is just as important as alone time or downtime. So we're really respectful about who needs to go into their places of choice to be quiet, to cleanse the day, to quiet the noise. Intermittent fasting is that. So you might notice your breath. You might notice the sensations that are happening in your body. You might be able to say, hey, listen, I'm having a reaction. I'm having a feeling about this, but I'm going to go think about it and I can come back and talk about it later. All of these are beautiful forms of, let's say, I don't know, intermittent emotionality or reactivity. And this is the beginning of awareness, taking the sacred pause. For some of you, when you're on the meditation journey, this would be your time to get quiet in meditation for 20 minutes, or as my parents call it, los 20. They do two veintes. 20 means 20 in Spanish. They take two veintes a day. They meditate twice a day. I'll give that to you. They gave it to me. All right, let's go into stage 2. Listen to this. This is where it starts to get like cool, nerdy science. In stage 2, the fast is where you're moving into 17 hours plus. And when you hit the 16th hour, you hit something called autophagy. Write that down. Around 17 hours, the body enters autophagy. Autophagy is a process where the body breaks down and recycles damaged cells. It recycles misfolded proteins. It cleans out internal debris. It is one of the most powerful repair mechanisms we have. Do you love autophagy? Can we just love autophagy? It's like a little internal Roomba that finds damaged cells, that finds little like trash, that cleans it up by hour 17. And of course, less inflammation, less and less and less inflammation because your body is repairing internally. Now, check it out. Psychologically, this is when something similar happens. When you stop reacting, creating more drama, let's say, when you stop consuming constant, your mind begins to clean house. Can I let this go? That's what we would say in dynamic. I always say just sit down and put little sticky notes on each of your thoughts and say, can I let this go? Now, old thoughts are going to surface, thoughts about what you're making for dinner, thoughts about the fight you had last night, old memories appear. You might notice some belief systems that you were just living out of and never questioning or at least observing. You know, the observer comes alive during this period, which is 50% of meditation, I like to say. The observer comes alive and says, why am I thinking about it like this? Why am I thinking about this right now? Why does this memory keep popping up? Why do I have such disproportionate reactions to this event? Or how about this one? I thought I was over that. Okay, this is a time psychospiritually of deeper meditation. This might be your therapy session where you really are going in and observing what happens inside of you, like a little video camera, like a pro camera that's going on inside of you and saying, I have some tightness in the chest. Again, like a internal Roomba that starts to do this cleanup process. And this might be when we meditate for longer than los 20, than 20 minutes. We really sit and we'll feel like the itches and the twitches, the discomforts. Because remember, we're not consuming any addictions either, whether that's social media, whether that's pizza, whether that's porn, whether that's a glass of wine, every night after dinner. No, none of that. We're not consuming. So it leaves us with our internal world. Some of the things that might help here is extending your meditation time, journaling, PhD on me. And you might journal like just a free write on and on and on and on and on. I have an exercise called the now feeling. We just go through it and you'll see more of that of what I'm announcing for 2026. As I said before, therapy or reflective conversation with someone because it allows this content to arise. So this is like a mental autophagy, a cleanse. I also like truth telling to myself because I always feel like truth just cuts through the fat. Literally, it's like those sprays that just cleans those pans from the fat immediately. I don't mean your physical fat, by the way. I mean the BS fat that I'm telling to myself. All right, let's move into stage 3. And again, I'm doing baby fasting. Go find out more from all the experts. Stage 3 is the gut reset fast. Now, stage 3 is 24 hours. It's a full 24 hours. At 24 hours, your digestive system gets a full reset. Full. Your gut lining begins to repair. You know how there's all this talk about the microbiome? Well, the microbiome finds balance because it's allowed, there's a ton of space. It's not busy working, responding to the external world, right? Shout out empath, not busy responding outside so that you can actually do a reset inside. And the gut is deeply connected to the nervous system. So you might find that you emotionally regulate different and likely better, even though you might get cranky because you're not eating. But you know why you're cranky. It's not because of a trigger. At this point, you might be feeling more intuitive, more sensitive, more emotionally present. So on the inner journey, this would symbolize, right, because we're getting deeper and deeper, root chakra stuff, attachment topics, safety topics. Because what's in the root chakra? Belonging, safety, stability, security, protection. You might begin to notice what nourishes me. Where do I feel safe? Who do I feel safe? You might begin to think about your attachment style and how it was connected to how you were brought up. It digs deeper, is the point. It is going for a reset. You might think of, whoa, what drains me? Where are my leaks? What feels like home? Right? We're getting deeper into the inner journey at this point. And so embodiment, yoga, deep therapy, maybe a grounding rituals, grieving your attachment style. Because if you have a history of complex post-traumatic stress or general anxiety disorder or mood disorders, these are all signs of things that happened in childhood. So this is the part, if you want to see it this way, where you're learning to digest life differently. You feel me? Okay, here we go, deeper into the tunnel. So stage 4 is the fat burner fast. 36 hours. I've done all these fasts, by the way. Very interesting process. This is where biology meets your towers falling. At 36 hours, what's happening in the body is that it's depleting the glycogen stores and it begins to burn fat. So it's eaten up all your carbs, that whole layer of carbs, that whole layer of daily food, of daily consumption. It's burned through all of that. And now it can actually go into your fat stores. Very powerful. It starts to turn it over to use fat as fuel. This might even start as early as the 17 hours, by the way, you all, but by the time it hits 36, this is the place to really start burning fat. And this is metabolically demanding. You'll definitely feel hunger. You'll definitely feel like energy roller coastering a little bit. And emotionally, you could feel challenged, whether you're doing the inner journey or not, because you're used to, this is when you start noticing your habits, your addictions, because you're not filling with, I don't know, that that piece of bread, you're not filling with what you usually fill yourself. The body is basically saying, "Hey, we're using reserves now." And psychologically and spiritually, we might name this the dark night of the soul. Talked about this, the towers falling, the burning bush, everything this is where the phoenix goes to the ashes first. This is the death and rebirth, Scorpio's death and rebirth, everything that I've been talking about on the podcast. This is really the process where we start to what Thomas Keating used to call the death of the false self, when we really just start noticing what identities we've architected to survive. And we question them in a kind way, like, do I want to keep you? This is when we really see the addictive process. And by the way, in addictions, by 36 hours, you're in heavy detox. Heavy detox. If you have an addiction and you haven't used in 36 hours, this is, you're really going to start feeling the craving, the compulsion to use again, because coping strategies stop working. Everything that we've been avoiding, that internal voice, we're there. We're in the midst of the wrestling. We are spelunking at this point. We are crawling. We might cry. We might revisit or realize our trauma. This is also in psychedelic psychotherapy. This is a place where you might go deeply inside. This is a tricky thing with psychedelic psychotherapy, you all. I always suggest that you stay in therapy, even if you have a trained guide with ayahuasca and psilocybin, anything that's obviously legal and guided by trained experts who've studied this. Sometimes people might go on a journey, but they don't continue with the work, which means that you hit 36 hours without ever doing the first fasts. It's pretty intense because you will see deeper things about yourself that you might have been avoiding all your life, or they might have been a blind spot all your life, or you might have denied because they're extremely painful and hard to look at. This is where people wrestle with the angel like Jacob and Gabriel. But none of it is to win, it's to be transformed. Silent retreats will do this. It's hard. It's hard. But boy, it is the stuff, right? It is the deep cleanse, the deep detoxify right here. So what helps? Support people around you who really know about this process. People who've been ahead of you, like in 12-step groups, people have been sober for a long time, a therapist, a support group, a community, a best friend, a good spouse who will go with you. In terms of the actual fasting, you want to let your family or your spouse know, okay, I'm going into 36 hours, just so they know that you might be struggling. What also helps there is broth and what they call fasting snacks, a little teaspoon of olive oil, but to feel supported, sustained, contained, but also to surrender to the process at this point. To say, all right, let's clean it all out so that I can look at it. So it's not about punishing yourself. It's actually about clearing everything. This is the death right before the rebirth. It's the ashes right before the rising. So let's talk about stage 5. 48 hours. 48. This is the dopamine fast. This is where we hit biology meets addiction meets self-hate. And in my book, self-hate is the biggest lie, the gooeyest lie, the most ashamed of the ashaming lies that we've got going on, which is why we stay away from it, which is why we layer it, which is why we cover it, which is why we avoid it, which is why we addict it away. Because it feels so horrible, but it's a lie. So we've got to get to it, and we can't get to it until we do very deep work like the 40 fast. So biologically, about 40 into 48 hours, dopamine receptors begin to reset. That's why addicts have to stay 4 or 5 days just cleaning up, and it's not easy. The brain becomes less dependent on constant stimulation to feel okay. And for those of you out there, think of all of your addictions. But isn't it beautiful that the brain resets, you have it inside of you. So psychologically, yes, this is where addictions surface. And we're not talking just substances, y'all. We're talking about behaviors. Workaholism, all the isms, because the isms are belief systems that are now a habit. So everything that you've used to cope, overworking, empaths, overgiving, codependence, scrolling, fantasy, chaos, validation seeking, pride. Believe it or not, pride is a really strong, it keeps us from asking. Lester Levinson always said, pride is a hide. It's a way for you to hide. So again, none of this is failure. Some of this were put into us, my loves. We brought it as an inherited package that we got from our ancestors. And it's so hard to look at that it's just hard to get to. But we have access and we can clean this up. Try to not judge yourself or be ashamed, which is really hard, because it comes hand in hand. They're Siamese twins. Shame and addictions, hand in hand, fist bumping. But the way to be compassionate is to tell yourself, this is what you did to cope with feeling desperately alone, very likely as a child. This is because something in your ecosystem was full of shame. You were ashamed, but that wasn't yours. You might have absorbed shame. This was because maybe your home was filled with silence. But remember, we're energetic beings. You were picking up on all sorts of conversation, even if there was silence. What if there was volatility and punishment and violence? Sometimes it's just being the child of immigrants. It's hard. Identity shame. And guess what? Here's the spoiler alert. We all have them. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what your race is, your ethnicity is, your sexuality is. It is part of the human condition. Let me break the news. Even for those folks who feel above and superior and whatever they feel that makes them superior, even for those folks who walk around in their pride, usually because they're having to fight some sort of inferiority to feel superior, even they have this deep place inside. I know it in myself. I know it after 25 years of sitting in session with folks from everywhere. I know it from 12-step rooms where there's all sorts of people from all sorts of economic classes. Same pain, absorbed shame, and self-hate that was learned from the outside. When we reach this spot, inflammation drops further because we are burning through that shame. Because in this case, you stop feeding that cycle. You confront that inner voice that says that you're less than. You confront it. You confront that extremely mean bully that came from the outside, but that now you've internalized. This is the place you say, stop. I will not let you sabotage my life anymore. Beautiful. You say, halt. Remember in the past episodes. Use that mudra. And this isn't willpower. This is where we face the shadow, Jung's shadow, and this is where we integrate it. We integrate it. It's not separate from us. We welcome it back in. We say, I run the show now, and I run the show of loving myself, no matter my past. So that leads us into stage 6, which is the immune reset. And that's where, at this point, we're into 72 hours. And this is what I would call Renaissance, right? This is where biology and Renaissance comes in. Nacimiento, remember, rebirth, post-traumatic growth, PTG, trauma rising. All of that is happening in this stage. Listen to this, my tribe. Are you ready? Do you want to know the beauty of the vessel that you have right here? You want to know the beauty of it? At 72 hours, the body begins to produce new white blood cells. New. And the white blood cells are the little beautiful soldiers we've got that don't let infection happen. Literally, we have protection. We say to our root, I am protected. I claim protection. which is what we might have not had as babies, as children, is security, stability, protection, my loves. So guess what? We get a new little army of white little blood cells just protecting us. So a new immune system starts forming. Just like our boundaries, our preferences, we're no longer a revolving door. We decide who comes in and who comes out. So biologically, you are getting a new immune system by hour 72. And for the inner journey, this is where you curate your life. This is where you're full of gorgeous choice. You are choosing what you're going to consume, who you're going to be around, what your home's going to feel like, all of it. This is when you're sober, where you find new friends who are also on the journey, who are not pulling you back into the swamp. You choose. And what do I say? The freest human is the choosing human. You choose your people, your places, your boundaries, your inputs, and your outputs too. Because you don't just react willy-nilly. And this, my loves, you ready? This is heaven on earth. You know my intro? When I say to me, heaven on earth is that we are able to form secure attachments as adults. Here we are. Get this, by hour 72, Mindy Peltz talk about the fact that she always had a knee that bothered her and that it was getting worse because she was a runner. And so she said that she was just going to try something. She was going to do the 72-hour fast. Yep. It healed her knee because you do such a cleanse that your body is able to renovate itself. And that is exactly what we do in heaven on earth. We look through what was given to us in our childhood. And I'm going to do a podcast on my volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3, because here we're in volume 3 of our life, where we do a deep cleanse, where we notice what was given to us, whether it was trauma, whether it was amazingness, it doesn't matter what was given, the story that was given to us. And then we go in and decide, we clean up through our pain, through our explosions, through the sleeping volcano waking up, through the towers falling. All of those things happen through our panic attacks, that we go in and we have to activate our tools in order to clean up what we don't want from the story that was given to us. So by the time, let's say we hit the 72 hours, we are recreating a whole new story. We are deciding, we are the ones, in dynamic meditation method, I teach this, we are the ones who write the story, including what we want to keep. Do we have a new type of family? Are you getting me? Are you feeling me? When I talk about creating a new algorithm, this is what I'm talking about. This is the heaven on earth that so your palette changes, your relational dynamics change, your relational choices change, your preferences change, and toxic just becomes less attractive. It just does. It's like after we detox the body, it's really hard to put something in it that's gonna really make our stomach hurt, basically. And I would say our mornings hurt, because sometimes I make decisions by what I'm gonna feel like in the morning. All sorts of decisions. How will I feel in the morning? Good question. That's a good cloudism. Let's add that to the store. So it's not rigid, it's natural, it's organic. It's beautiful. I want to welcome you to the beauty. I'm not saying that the middle stages, that 36-hour fast, you're not like, oh, you're not twitching. You're not in full craving. You are. But just hold the grander picture of what it's going to feel like in the morning. And for our humanity, what's it going to feel like to have more humans who choose this path? So get this. So let's integrate. Let's bring it all together. Take a breath. This becomes a way of being. What I want you to know is that even though creating this type of habits does feel hard at first, Lester Levinson used to say, it takes effort to get to the effortless place. And all that means is when we're reverse engineering a habit, or when we're wanting to start a new momentum, it doesn't matter for what. like your exercise habit, your meditation habit, your staying quiet habit, whatever. You're making the bed habit, right? It's going to take effort at first before it becomes effortless. So eventually, this is going to feel easier than staying stuck. In fact, you're going to know when you get sticky. You're going to know, like, ooh, because you've done all of this work, you know your sticky places. Fasting then becomes easier than medicating, than filling with something. Again, I'm not suggesting you do it. Please follow all the experts. What I do know, and I am suggesting because I am a psychotherapist and because of my own personal journey, is that healing becomes easier than numbing, suppressing, repressing, exploding. Healing becomes a safer, quieter place that's all yours. It becomes a lifestyle. It's how you live, especially in volume 3. It has a different type of pleasure, different type of joy, different types of connections. You actually are now able to say no with ease just because you ask yourself, what's it going to feel like? If I go out with this friend, if I tell that lie, just doesn't sit. Recovery is a lot faster. I always tell my people, even if you fall into like bad behaviors again, check how the recovery is, because that's where we see healing too. How quickly did you recover? How quickly did you repair? How quickly relationally did you go in and say, hey, I want to talk about this? I want to clean this up. This is important to me. You are important to me. We are important much more than pride or than the issue or than winning. How quick is your recovery? You're less inflamed, which means you're less triggered. It doesn't mean you don't get triggered. It means that your response to your triggers are very different. Your response to your wobbly periods are very different. How we respond to those things, extremely different. And yeah, you come home to yourself over and over and over, to you. Because imagine all the delayering that you've done. And you get to say, oh, I want to be funny in that way. This is how I want to hang out with friends now. This is who I want to be as a family. And sometimes that means choosing a new family. Sometimes. Because for some of us, there's a lot of trauma that's still very active in our families of origin. So there it is. I finally did it. I finally talked about fasting. I know I'm going to get more thoughts about this, but I don't want the podcast to go on and on and on. But I hope it tickles your brain, because it really was a match for me. In the rebirth part in volume 3 in Heaven on Earth, it is about you becoming anew, as I like to say. But it's also about you remembering parts of yourself that you might have been embarrassed by, ashamed, you never showed anyone. You're just more courageous. You're just more free to be you. And every time you choose yourself, you come, and this is home. I was talking to someone yesterday, and we both said that it's an interesting thing. So let me leave with this. The cleaner we are, meaning the more healed we are, the more access we have to our spiritual moments throughout our whole day. Some spiritual paths believe that the more spiritual we are, we're not here anymore, we're not in our body. That's not what I mean at all. I mean that we have heaven on earth, like the Buddha sitting like this, reaching for the skies and touching the ground. So the more healed, the more spiritual we are, the more psychologically aware, the more we love being in our body, the more we love and can see the beauty around us and on planet Earth, the more we can see the beauty in humanity. Go, humanity. Humanity wins. That's what I mean by having heaven. So welcome home. Bring it on 2026. And I'll see you in the next Heaven on Earth